Hello, Art Base supporters and friends. My name is Lissa Ballinger, and I'm the curator at the Art Base here in downtown historic Basalt. And I have the absolute pleasure to be sitting here with my dear friend and artist, Michael Kinsley from Old Snowmass, for his exhibition that is opening on Friday, December 10th. From 5 to 7 is the opening, and this show is running through January 8th. The title of the exhibition is Synthesis, and the sponsor of this exhibition is Modern Luxury Aspen Magazine. So we hope that you will come visit us for the opening. The operating hours of the Art Base are Tuesday through Saturday, 11 to 5 p.m., and our address is in downtown Basalt at 174 Midland Avenue. So we hope you come, and now that I've said all the details, I'm going to hand it over to Michael.
And remember, we're going to do two receptions.
Oh, you're right.
Because
yes.
we wanted to spread the crowd out a bit. So Friday and Saturday.
Saturday the 11th.
The 11th, yeah, Friday.
From 5 to 7 as well.
Yeah.
Thank you for that reminder.
And I want to acknowledge Art Base, and not only Art Base, but all of the remarkable arts organizations in this valley. And I was thinking about it last night. There's at least 5 really powerful reasons that these art organizations are so important to us. One is, the obvious one, is that artists get to learn more. I'm still taking classes, workshops. Another one is it's emotionally risky to put yourself out in public, especially at first. You know, we all think, oh, that thing looks like hell, I can't put that in. And so it gives us this sort of gets us over the threshold.
Yeah, it's very vulnerable.
Yeah. And so it creates, it's also a place, another place that artists can develop sort of courage by association, getting together, so we feel we support one another. It's really important. It also, I think, expands the potential for innovation, because the art that gets on the walls in community arts organizations, especially Art Base, isn't only there to make money, and sometimes they're not at all to make money. It's there because it's interesting or new or whatever. So it's a wider range of potential. And the last thing is that it's just another place where we can invite the public into our little worlds that we create with art. So it's so important, and a remarkable valley to have 5 or 6 different organizations.
And it's also a neutral space, regardless of anything that's happening politically or elsewhere in the world. It's a neutral space where, you would be amazed at the diverse people that enter. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
And just add one thing, and it's more than about just art. I worked on sustainable development and communities for Rocky Mountain Institute for more than 20 years. And what I learned was that the primary ingredient that made a community successful was its sense of community and the fabric of the community. And it's a softer measure. It's not like having a railhead or one of those hard, but that becomes the most important thing for the economic and social strength of a community, and arts is a major player in that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Speaking about this show particularly, can you just talk to the viewers about what they're going to see when they come to this space, and then sort of segue into your title, which obviously is also what they're going to see?
Synthesis. So, like so many artists, for many years, I worked with representational. I worked landscapes that looked like that place, very clearly recognizable, which I love doing, still love doing. And that's great, and I felt like I've got reasonably competent at doing that. But then I started thinking, geez, can I do something more interesting or more fun? And so I wanted to loosen myself up. So for a while, I started doing abstracts. There's one in the show, just to your right. It's a sort of a play on canyons in Utah. And a lot of my abstracts were variations, improvisations on the shapes, often the little small shapes. in
Details.
details. Thank you, in the rock. So I did that for a couple of years, and so when I started back into doing landscapes, in fact, they got a lot looser, and I started improvising on the shapes that are there. And sometimes the shapes we don't immediately see those shapes, but if you ponder, I paint outside a lot and sketch outside a lot. And if you just sit and look at a scene for a long time, you start seeing a lot more. You start seeing all this fluid movement and sinuous activity that's really fun. So I started riffing off of those shapes and developed this new form that I call, for lack of a better term, fluid landscapes.
Yeah, I think that's a really accurate way to describe them. The way that I describe them is almost fantastical. Like they're a little bit more playful, and they're voluptuous. Like that's a word. I love the word sinuous, but they're voluptuous. They're not, you're seeing something, but they're making you, the viewer, think, wow, maybe I could see this in a different way. Maybe it's not just, there's magic in what I'm looking at, and it's not just a literal landscape.
I was painting some mountains right around Ouray, Colorado, and did a mountain that's just slightly south of Ouray after you come up out of town in those switchbacks there. And when I finished painting it, a friend of mine said, well, that looks like Tolkien or something.
Totally.
So it's called J.R.R. in Ouray.
There are definitely some Hobbit places within these pieces as well. When you look at it, for instance, the piece that's right behind you, which I'm excited to say is already sold, they make you smile. Like there's a joy that's yes, I think so. Yeah. So, I mean, when you see the completed pieces, do you have that same? I'm sure sometimes, not always.
Well, that's a wonderful thing to say. A lot of people want to make a political statement in their art, which is great. But I make a political statement outside of my art world. When I want a painting to make people feel good, either make joy, what other emotion, what better emotion could one ask for, or quiet, or just a connection to the place. So thank you for that. That's great.
Yeah. Well, you said a little bit about your process. You said you paint en plein air sometimes or from sketches. Is that how you prefer to do it? And tell the viewers about your medium that you choose and how you choose your subject matter.
Yeah. So I work oil on canvas, 90% or more, a little bit of acrylic on canvas, or on panel sometimes. The subject that I may choose, it's when I'm just, it's kind of a neurosis. Because it's kind of like I see a place and I want to take it home. I want to hold on to it, which is, my shrink friends would probably say, you need to loosen up, or but I want to take that home. I want to own it. But it's also looking at the shapes and how they converge. In this piece, the Coulter Valley does that a lot. I stumbled on that valley this summer and was trying to find, I love just the place. It's a real peaceful feeling place. And I just happened to stop on the road in this place where all these shapes just folded together. And that's it. It was like, right now, I knew it was it. So I sketched that piece. So sometimes I paint outside direct. Those are the small pieces. The small pieces you see here were painted directly outside. But also, and I mean, the truth is, about half of what I do outside I wouldn't show anywhere. And they are the learning process. So the bigger, more successful pieces come out of sketching on site. And then I also photograph the scene so I can use the color notes from those photographs. But the composition comes from the sketch. I haven't figured out a way of explaining it yet, but guys like Dan Young, who I've learned a lot from, a great landscape painter in Silt, who shows right across the street at the Core Logos Gallery quite often, talks about the essential nature of working outside. And when I first heard that, well, what's the difference? Why don't I just take a photograph and paint the photograph? And I did that for many, many years. But then I began to realize that standing there, sitting there on site, I could see these shapes that when the photograph was...
Yeah, there's a three-dimensionality.
How many times have you been on a vacation? You took these photographs of these amazing places, and you get home and you go,
yeah.
That's because few of us are great photographers. I'm
Right.
not a great photographer.
Right. But it is an interpretation. So you're seeing something, but you're seeing all of the folds, like you said, and that's what you're trying to interpret into the piece.
The way the ground falls away over here and folds over, it's just wonderful the way. And just sitting there, it requires time to sit there and be with that spot. Yeah.
And you mentioned this, you've alluded to it, but I want to talk about your past life as county commissioner, and also you're still a mediator as far as I know. Yeah. And then this transition that you've made. This wasn't your original career, and you were self-taught, although you've taken many, many classes. So speak to that, please.
Well, I showed up in this valley a little more than by accident 50 years ago and just stayed. I never really decided to move here. And it wasn't the skiing. I wasn't a skier when I got here, although I certainly do now. But it was the strong sense of community and the efficacy of this place and the drive to it, the dynamism, which is manifest, as I said before, among other things, by all these great arts organizations. So I got involved in an environmental group, and for about 5 years I was the sole employee and director of this little environmental group, and then I ran for county commissioner, and I did that for 10 years. That's during the time when the transition from the old boy government to the progressive environmental government that took place in the early to mid 70s. So I was very much a part of that, thanks to Joe Edwards and Dwight Shellman, who were the real leaders in that. And then in 83 to 85, I went to work for Rocky Mountain Institute, which is a remarkable place doing amazing work, and it was tiny when I started.
No longer tiny.
Out in Old Snowmass, and now it's in several countries. There's like 4 offices in this country and 350 people doing great. And the primary work I did there was community sustainability, and actually doing that in a practical way, not in a theoretical way, working on the ground in funky little places, where I learned about how that sense of community is so powerful and how it's nearly everywhere. The places that are really falling apart are the places where that sense of community has just been exploded. That's that responsive to?
Yeah. Well, also know about your painting. Speak to that.
So I started painting, I started playing with it when in 6th grade. I wish I could, Steve Fountain, my 6th grade teacher, I wish I could.
I cannot believe you remember his name. That's remarkable.
I can't remember anybody.
That's a shout out to all the teachers who are watching this.
Absolutely. And wonderful guy, and he saw that I had some interest, and he really encouraged me, and that sort of got me going. And I played around with it a little bit when I was in college, no classes in college. And then I just didn't do it anymore. I just stopped. And then when I was about 40, I had this just hunger to do something. And I carved on wood a little bit, which I'd done as a kid. And then I just started, and then I had a couple of experiences that were virtual epiphanies in the National Gallery and a couple of other
So actually
museums.
with artworks, other people's artworks.
Yeah, sitting in front of a painting and being emotionally moved and driven and motivated was extremely important.
Can you speak to one piece that you remember that had this?
Yeah.
Just one. I'm just so curious.
Well, there are many, but there was a Rembrandt self-portrait that's in the National Gallery, and I was in there sort of by default because I wanted to go to the Air and Space Museum. The guy I was with wanted to go to the National Gallery. Okay, I'll go there instead. And I was just standing there looking at this, and it's kind of woo-woo, but the guy spoke to me. I didn't hear words, but it was like he said, "Hey, dummy, this is serious stuff, pay attention."
Yeah.
And it was like lifting a veil from my eyes for the rest of the day, wandering around this museum. Museums are, and this is in a way a museum, are so important in so many ways, emotional, community ways.
So then you had that experience, you came back, you started painting landscapes.
Well, it took several times to kick me. And there was another one I saw later, because I had a false start that time. I got my pastels out that were, shoved away in a box somewhere, and I tried a couple. Well, it looks like hell. I lost whatever I had when I was a kid, so I didn't do it. And then I saw a Van Gogh exhibit, Van Gogh exhibit at the Met in New York, and it absolutely rocked my world, and because I'd just seen his stuff in reproductions, and in those days reproductions were really crappy, and now some of the stuff you can see in books look really good, but
still there's nothing like seeing something in person.
It's just
period. The scale and everything is just
emotion
and the brush strokes
and everything, and because his stuff is so impasto, the thick shapes, it's great.
And are you still taking classes to this day?
Yeah. I took a Dan Young class, less than a year ago. Still learning, and his stuff is conventional, traditional landscapes. And I don't want to ever lose that. I mean, Mom Nature makes great stuff.
She does.
Yep. We don't have to mess with it. So I'm going to do both forever.
And I love, I've had the pleasure of visiting Michael's studio over many years, and what I notice every time is that the studio takes over more and more of your home and personal space, which I think is a wonderful thing. That just shows how much more captivating it is for you and how much more of a part of you this is becoming.
Yeah, I had a flood in my laundry room that went into my living room and destroyed the floors, so I had to redo it. So my little studio in my living room
suddenly is expanded.
It is like triple the size it was. So now my living room is a little tiny part of that room, and my studio is a huge
as it
portion.
Should be.
Yeah, exactly.
So this show is really, it's so wonderful because you can see the progression of your work that you spoke about, from traditional landscapes to abstract to the fluidic landscapes. How is your work continuing to evolve? How do you feel?
I don't know.
Great answer.
Yeah,
you don't have to know.
I don't know where it's going. These fluid shapes were very much inspired by a remarkable woman named Emily Carr, who was 100 years ago in Victoria, BC, who had none of those advantages that I described earlier. She was by herself in a very hidebound, old school town, and she had the advantage of being able to study in Europe when she was young. And then she showed a couple of times and was just slammed by everybody, and she just quit for like 15 or 20 years. And then she connected with some folks in Toronto, the group of 7, Franklin Carmichael being the one that really knocks my socks off of that group. And they really reinforced her and said, "You're one of us," and got her going again. So she had none of those advantages that we have here, but cut through it, and being a woman too, she was completely dismissed by her community. She was just this wacky old lady that was running a rooming house, as far as anybody was concerned. Wait, what would you ask me? I forgot what you asked me.
What did I ask you? I can't remember. But speaking to your point about community again, like that's showing you again the importance of how hard it is if you're doing this in isolation, how important it is to be able to show your work, be able to get feedback from other artists, and be emboldened to keep going.
I know what you asked me. You asked me where I was going next. So
yes. Oh yeah, the evolution.
So I sort of played with her style a little bit, or not her style, but riffing on her style a little bit. And at first what I did really just felt kind of like cartoons, and I dismissed it as not really, and it took me years to finally realize that there was something there. And so it was a surprise, in effect. So when you see these kinds of sinuous shapes, the Cimarron Ridge piece is very much part of that, and the one of Wagner Mountain, which is in Woody Creek, from a photograph by my friend Greg Poshman. All these wonderful shapes. I just finally realized that there was something important there.
And it's a particular style that is unique to you, even though it is influenced by these traditional artists, I mean, many of them that you named. It is very uniquely you, which is, good. Yeah, I know. Do you feel that? Like, do you look at these and say, this is me, this is what I'm seeing, or? More
and more. What I'm going for is I want it to be recognizable. And somebody who commented, who lived right in that scene for years, just told me yesterday that it was recognizable to her, but at the same time, improvisational. Yeah. And my favorite kind of music is improvisational jazz. And
you never know where it's going.
Yeah. And so the answer to your question is, I don't know where it's going. Yeah.
Well,
I do know I need to get better at mixing paint, and I don't think I'll ever learn how to mix paint.
Such an interesting comment.
It's really hard.
Yeah. Wow.
It's very, very hard.
Wow, I've never heard that.
Yeah,
Tell me more. So
well,
whatever color you have in your head is hard to actually get that same.
Or, yeah, I mean, that, and also that you start mixing to do, and then you get something you didn't expect.
Yeah. For better or for worse.
Yeah.
I love that perspective.
Yeah.
No one's ever said that to me before. But I'm sure that's absolutely true. Yeah. It must be so frustrating to want to have an exact tonation of color and not be able to necessarily have it.
And one of the things that makes a really great plein air painter, essential, is to work really fast.
Yeah.
And I don't work fast, which is why I have a lot of failures outside.
But failures are, I'm sure.
And the critical function that you have to do outside fast is mixing the paint.
Wow. I'm so grateful you shared that. That's totally new for me.
Yeah, because you see, I want to get that sky out, and you go like that. Oh no, that's not right, and you go.
And then the sky's changed.
So in your studio, you can sit and mess with that for 45 minutes. Right. But if you're outside, everything just changed while you were messing around changing that color, or trying to achieve that color. Yeah.
So with everything you've done in your life, do you now, when you introduce yourself, do you say, I'm Michael Kinsley, I'm an artist, Is that something that you are comfortable defining yourself? Like, is that, I see you, that's how I would see you first now, but I'm just curious to see how you...
Yeah, that's starting to happen. It was funny you asked that. Dan Richardson, the mayor of Carbondale, and a good friend, when he was years ago on the city council in Glenwood, he asked me to come down and talk about some work that I do in communities to a group that he was working with. And everybody up Valley always introduced me as the ex-county commissioner or the guy that works for RMI. And he was the first one to introduce me as an artist. And that felt really good. It just, yeah.
Well, it's deserved.
And not to diminish in any way that work I did before. I loved that work. So many artists try to get rid of their day job because they don't like their day job in order to paint all the time. But one of the reasons I didn't do that is because I was committed to that work at Rocky Mountain Institute. It's extraordinarily important work. Yeah. And I can't leave that work behind. I'm still on as a volunteer on a board of CLEAR.
Thank goodness.
Work on clean energy. Yeah.
So Michael, do you have anything else you want to share with our viewers other than to come to the opening on Friday and Saturday evening from 5 to 7? Just
to my friends who've either bought my paintings or just said nice things, thank you very much. It's really kind to say those things, but it's really important when any artist to sort of reinforce what they're doing, because every one of us is uncertain. Yeah. Even the greatest artists are uncertain. We look at something on the easel that we just did. Well, I don't know, does that really work or not?
And I always say this, the courage that it takes for artists to put together an exhibition and make yourself this vulnerable. I really feel that it's you, it's your presentation, and I'm always grateful that artists are up to that, are brave enough for that challenge.
Well, and thank you for making it possible.
Yes,
Yeah.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much, Michael. We hope we see all of you over the next month. Again, this show concludes January 8th, 2022. Our hours are 11 to 5, Tuesday through Saturday at 174 Midland Avenue. Thank you so much for supporting the Art Base and for joining us today.